And we're going to start with a debrief of what you experienced. I want to first hear from you. I don't know if we have any extra microphones in the room, but I think many of you have demonstrated. Do we have any extra roving mics? We can do a Phil Donahue, which ages me, I guess. You don't know what that reference is. Dave does. All right. Let's connect the dots. So I poked my hand in the two other workshops as well. There is in GTL, we're working on fairly different domains. We now have 4 domains, and we'll have, we believe, 5 fundamentally different domains. What that means is the underlying system of systems model and the kinds of decisions being made are quite different, but we're trying to find some common ways to build this platform to do these experiments. So, Sridhar, go ahead. What was your experience, and how do you think it relates to the strategy implementation gap?
So as an implementer, right, it comes down to basically managing resources relative to the priorities that you're given.
And just to be clear, you were in the project design,
right?
Project planning
workshop, right? You have a stretcher, you have given a set of objectives that you need to deliver to, and you have a limited set of resources that you are constrained by. And the reality strikes, and you have all sorts of chaos you need to deal with, and more often than not, you cannot deliver all those objectives given the resources that you have. And having the tools to be able to model and having those scenarios planned to be able to say, here is what you can do given the set of resources is a very powerful tool.
But Sridhar, let me push back on that. Let me ask. I mean, I think that I'm role playing, so I like you, so don't. But isn't it true that these are things that firms have had to do for a long time, and some firms have done well? So what insight can we gain about maybe from the workshops and the conference that we might do differently, or at least explore differently than what firms have had at hand previously?
So the ability to do those modeling, the ability to do the scenario planning is not, the firms that do well do those scenario planning well. The firms that don't do well do not do that well. That's all I'm trying to say.
It's interesting, and I think Vic made several points, period, but Vic made several points about scenario planning, and I think we could point to firms that have gone down the path of doing modeling and creating this sort of environment, but it actually leads them to paralysis analysis, or they create self-fulfilling prophecies, right? So this is not an elixir, but I think it's an ingredient. Anyone else want to comment on their experience, maybe in one of the other 2 workshops? Was anybody here in the maritime workshop? Who was in that workshop? Dai? Hiyakata sensei? What do you think, Kazuo? What do you think? So you're a maritime expert, right? So you work for the Japanese
yes, right.
Imperial University Naval Architecture Lab, now renamed. What's different about this treatment and this level or layer of interactions compared to what the industry does today?
I think industry and real world, they try to choose the kind of baseline or most conservative option, I think. But in this way, we can explore the wider trade space, especially with some investment. I'm not sure the actual discussion in the farms, but they tend to use not investing options, I think.
Well, at least, or maybe perhaps the decision is based on a reduced single-dimensional variable. And part of the question is can we use these methods to allow for multidimensional begin to see trade-offs or corners of the trade space we would say that we would not normally see. Anybody else? Who was in IRA's, besides IRA, who was in Ira's workshop. What do you think, Bruce?
A lot of fun. There were two simulations. One, oh good, thank you. Give me the microphone. Thanks to Ira. Two simulations, the first being traffic and parking, and looking at a couple of different variables, but one of the things that emerged from the commentary was both autonomous vehicles, what would happen if cars are self-driving cars, but then there was another factor that related to ride sharing. And one of the participants observed, actually the ride sharing had a much bigger effect. And Art described, well, there's maybe some, some treasures are hidden inside the simulation, but they're not pushed out there. It's left for people to discover or not discover, and it's some experiment, not only for the user, but also for the designer. And then the second experience was the one based on, we heard this morning from the GlaxoSmithKline with an anonymized data, but also with both display. There were two different versions. One played on a computer screen and another played with the tactile. So there's also some comparison. What does it mean to play the game in different environments? So a lot of interesting things. That's just the surface.
Great.
Thanks.
Good. Yes, let's go here. Patrick here in front of the column. Unless, Michael, unless you have a comment. Thank you.
I think I was in the same group, and for me, one of the things is the black boxness of the simulation. So that if you can't actually work out why the simulation's doing what it's doing adequately, you don't quite trust it. The second one, to me, was much more transparent, and I could imagine using that as a planning tool, because I couldn't work out quite how the first one was working. I wouldn't trust it as a planning tool.
Yeah.
Now, if you're actually involved in it, it might be a different story. But I think always, it's your point about multiple variables. You kind of got to trust the model to be able to use it.
At some point, yeah.
At some point. So, they're always a simplification.
But what we know together, I think I agree with you completely, but what's really often ironic is that we walk into firms where the effective model they're using is either some old dude, right, or some crazy spreadsheet, right? Which, so it's ironic, but it does come back to the importance of not just trust, but then trust and facility, the way that the team of teams works around these. And that's why I pointed out, I think that this system of systems modeling with integrity, with transparency, with clarity, based on fundamentals, Vic, wherever you are, principles of socio-technical systems, but also interactive visualization. And the third piece, teamwork science. So I want to wrap up in the debriefing here with some of the results of the methods from our students. And Ira, I don't know if you're going to show anything today. Good. So I'll start. Now, this is for those of you who weren't in our project design workshop. The objective was to try to look at a project model, which is a plan, and make changes. And so fundamentally, you may be given a project, which is a baseline estimate, and then you do something. Right, you do something and you make a change, and towards utopia on the lower left for reduced cost and duration, that change, that vector, leads you to a different potential project. But that each of those change can exhibit something that is architectural, something that is elemental, something that is, and there's discussion around it. There's often exposure of assumptions. There's mental models around that. So we're interested in that what we call path dependency. How is it that we go through those sets of changes? And without getting into it, through the modeling, we actually begin looking at activities and teams and all these different things that are part of the model and tracking over time what people do. So let me show you. Let me come back to this. Pardon me. This is an example, a previous example, and I guess PS, we're not, do you want to have data today or not? You have some from today? So we'll come back to that at the end. But this is from a prior example, similar, it was a 2-hour workshop with 20 teams. And so each dot on here is a full project plan, and the axes are the original baseline. So what's interesting is, some of the teams, each team is a different color, actually increase cost and duration, but maybe that actually improves their learning. Maybe that's actually part of their path dependency, is an evidence of more willingness to take risk, more willingness to explore things versus not. So what becomes more interesting in our research is to begin looking at this pattern across different teams. So each of these teams now seen, some of these teams get stuck in local minima, Some of them fine. They are focusing on different things over time. And so it's not just the pattern overall, but looking at this in that 2-hour workshop for each of those teams shown as a different sequence. Each vector, again, is a conversation. Each vector is paying attention to some part of the broader system. It's some assertion that moving this will be differently. And so now, in our instrumented teamwork, we can begin to drill down even to each of those vectors and listen to what were they talking about. Who is talking? As Shinosuke's work showed, who was contributing and who wasn't? How did that evolve over time? So I believe we will come, I think it's going to take 2 more years, but we'll have a set of sensors that indicate the health of a socio-technical system for these class of projects in real time. An additional example from one of our colleagues visiting from TU Munich. This is a map of all the teams over time in terms of not what they changed, but what they paid attention to. So we call these fingerprints. So it shows that different teams, some teams really focused on activities. We can see where they've poked around, where they've looked, right? And we can also begin looking at the ratio of exploration to acting. And then more recently, our friend PS here in Earth Thesis is looking at a particular team. And this is a map for a team. Let me go to the next page, which is bigger. This is a map of a team based on, normally when you're modeling, you might go down a certain path and say, well, I'm going to change something and change something and change something. Then you roll back. So this is a map or a tree of the changes together. And their color coding is shown the kinds of things that they were changing. So what PS is working at, by understanding the outcomes, like which teams perform better, what sort of clustering is happening if we look at these changes over time. And so, in fact, she asked, what sensor measures correctly show the presence of strategy? Well, strategy is a broad word, so we asked, well, is that coherence? Is that, what would be evidenced in their path dependency and the kinds of elements they pay attention to that would be evidence of dependence? And she has come up with a particular clustering algorithm to take a look at, in this case, sets and combinations of actions in this project model to see if it's significant. So look for that work. It's 2 weeks, due 2 weeks from today.
All right. I can't wait to see your results, PS. Since not everyone was in our workshop, I just want to do a quick summary of what it was we were doing. There were 2 games we were playing, so I'm going to talk about one of the games, the later one. We essentially took a concept that John Dyson talked about this morning, which is the modular factory or the chip-based manufacturing model that we developed with some manufacturing strategy folks at GSK. Over the course of the research at MIT and Media Lab, we created this strategy game environment that lets you turn by turn view different drugs that you might manufacture over 20 years. And we're simulating a demand curve over 20 years based on real data, but anonymized so that we're not revealing any trade secrets or anything, but it's trained with real data. And you can also build manufacturing capacity across sites for each drug and try to see if you can keep up with demand. The thing about this game that's unique is that the predicted demand given to you up front is not actually accurate. Over the course of the game, you'll find that it's actually very, you'll shoot over capacity or be wildly under capacity, or your drug could fail. And you're forced to try and use this modular manufacturing technique to try to keep up the demand. So every time you end the turn, you're essentially locking in a year of decisions and you can't go back. So it was very strict for the teams. They felt it, so thanks for keeping up with it. But over the course of the 20 years, I think they learned some interesting patterns in the data. So they, all in all, had 10 drugs that they had to keep up with. Some were failing left and right, and some were wildly shooting their expectations. So what we did, this is the first time the teams are seeing this. I'm going to restart this really quickly. The teams, we had 6 stations, and each station was actually key logging, similar to Brian's research. Every time you hit the simulate button, we were tracking your progress. So the graph that was existing in a lot of people's interfaces, I'm just revisualizing here, but instead of seeing your own table, all 6 teams are visualized side by side. So don't worry, I'm just calling them Team A, B, C, so I'm not going to call anybody out. But we can actually look very closely at how, in this case, 5 KPIs tracked over time. So the interesting metric here, so on the left is just kind of just showing the time stamp. So it's just showing that all the teams were working at the same time, hitting that simulate button. So that's kind of, you don't have to worry too much about this area. So, but the graph on the right is really the meat of the analysis that we're working on. So the bottom axis is the, oh yeah, if we turn down the lights, please. So on the x-axis, we have the turn in the game. So there's 20 total terms. So on the far left, that's when they literally sat down at the beginning of the hour. And then over time, by turn 20, they've been already played 20 turns. And so the far right is their last decision. So the reason there's each color here is a separate team and how their score and each KPI tracked. So what I can do is change through these 5 different KPIs that were available each time, and we can look at them one by one, how they tracked. If this were a real experiment, I'd be interested in maybe following up and examining the behavior of each teams, but for now we're just going to have some fun and look at the scores. So first of all, CapEx, that's the measure of the capital investment. In short, each team, this is a graph of how much money each team spent and how quickly they spent it. Very common, all teams spent a lot of money up front to expand their factories, but the teams had very large distribution of how much they chose to expand. So green team, which is team, let's see, A here, I believe. Yep, team A, you spent the most money. Congratulations. And team E here spent the least. But that's just, all you know is they spent money, but we don't know yet how that affected some other outcomes. So for instance, here's cost of goods. This roughly translates to how much materials were spent on drugs, and it's also highly correlated with how they were satisfying demand overall. So the higher the curve, the more drugs they were selling. So this is probably a good thing. So the teal team here, which is team F, you can give yourself a pat on the back. You sold the most drugs. Congratulations. Operating expenses, that's just your running budget to maintain facilities. Not the largest cost in the game, but if you were worried about operations, you had some running more cheaply than others. Green again, spending a lot of money. Demand met. So this is a measure. If it's at 100%, you're essentially meeting your demand. And I'm assuming that the team we called out before, Team F, hovered near the top at 100% of meeting their demand. Team E, I'm assuming they kind of got lost on YouTube at one point. Maybe they're, or maybe just playing with the game, which is fine. And then finally, security of supply. So this was kind of the curveball in the simulation. And maybe as a researcher, for GSK's domain in particular, I'm curious to see how people dealt with that. It's a measure of how secure their entire manufacturing network was. It's roughly 2 parts that we didn't reveal up front. It's that the half of it is how much they could absorb capacity if there was a sudden spike, and the other half was how much they distributed across different sites. And some of the groups actually noticed that over the course of the game, which is neat. So the team B, you are the most secure. So congratulations, give yourself, team D, you didn't do bad either, so congratulations. All right, so I'm gonna hand the mic back off to Brian.
Okay, one last one, and then we'll wrap up. This is actually from a previous version of the maritime experiment. For who is a few of you were in the maritime. This shows us they were looking at a set of investment decisions in the transition to natural gas. And this, I know it's quite hard to see. In fact, it's impossible to see in yours. There's actually many gray dots. Can you see them at all? No? So there's a cloud of gray dots behind there. And this is actually, we might think it was a theoretic, but it's what a simulator or an analytic algorithm generated as the range of possible solutions. And so we're interested in when groups do this exploration based on experience and judgment, because the people who were in this particular workshop represented different industry with experience. They chose, first of all, you could see them jumping, except for in one case, to what is otherwise shown as a set of clusters that mean something. So we're trying to compare kind of human-driven exploration and expertise-driven across a trade space. In this case, the trade space is CO2 emissions and fuel cost efficiency for a new class of ships. And then equally, this is another graph that Lorena, are you here? Yeah. Oh, right here, hi. This is her work. And what you can see is that this is actually tracking over time during the workshop how, this is for one team, how through their exploration they're trading off NOx, the number of ships, that's mislabeled, what's the second, number of ships and the number of bunkering points. What's the second dimension? I think I mislabeled this for you.
Yeah, it was initial cost, so CapEx.
I see, that's cost. So green is cost, then number of ships, number of bunkers, bunker type, and then a bunch of trade variables such as how much commerce is done. So we're kind of seeing that over time, and in her observations, she's looking for surprises. Like, when is it in the exploration that there's evidence of a big difference between the design intended change effect and the actual effect? And we have multiple ways to try to detect that. And the red lines show what she's analyzed as a surprise during the exploration. And so we can begin looking at the set of things that happened before and after that surprise point to see if it affects their pattern of exploration moving forward. Anything else you want to say? Did you? No?
Dependency, surprise, so yeah.
Okay, good. Well, let me conclude by saying it's been a remarkable 2 days. And I really have to thank, if I could ask Pushpita and Paula and Martin and Sam to stand up, please. Are you guys here? Who's here? We lost half of our organizing team. But thank you guys so much. From the very beginning, as we were talking to Brightline about a symposium, you guys worked tirelessly while trying to juggle your classwork, and this could not have happened without you, so thank you so much. I also want to thank our research leads from Denmark, Joseph, who's on his way, and Eric here at MIT, and both Kenji and Kazuo at Tokyo for agreeing to participate, for lending your expertise to a symposium event which had both an education and a research purpose. So thank you so much for your participation. We'll leave you today with the following thought and reminder, that we chose, as Hal would probably be happy, we chose intentionally a topic and a set of speakers that may have made some of you uncomfortable. And where the language they spoke may have been outside of your realm. And I hope over the day and a half you would agree with us that these collisions were stimulative rather than depressing. So what it says to me, though, is that we, as the comments said, we have much more work to do to really establish a solid research foundation to make a difference in this area. There'll be, the videos will be available from these workshops. The draft papers are going to be selected. A subset will be selected, and we'll be putting out a publication based on this workshop. And of course, we are available. We really encourage you to reach out to us here at MIT, but also with our Brightline research partners to get engaged in helping us to uncover and characterize the gap between strategy and implementation. So with that, safe travels. We look forward to seeing you, and hopefully we'll see you in a related topic, perhaps in a year. Thanks.